Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
If check this out, we got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good evening, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is a Tuesday edition with Brady Kannon. We're going to break down, or I should say, he is going to break down the WGC Dell match play, an amazing golf match, head-to-heads. He will do all the breaking down. We were talking behind stage, and I've had some good success with this. I'm usually out in Vegas, though, and I'm back home on sunny Cape Cod, where spring has sprung. A beautiful, beautiful day. Listen, to pick a winner in golf, we were explaining strategies. 125, 135, 150 golfers. If you pick one name out of the hat, I don't care if he's 8-1 or 140-1. The odds of you winning with one ticket, it just doesn't happen. Brady does it the right way, meaning he knows, he understands the game. He has the statistics and the odds and everything to match it up with. And last Wednesday, Taylor Moore, 60-1. The clips are on our timeline. This gentleman here talked about him, and I'm writing my notes, and I got everything here. And that's all I heard about was Jordan Spieth all weekend. And I'm looking at the updated odds, and DraftKings was like just throwing carrots, plus 180, plus 200. And then in comes Sunday, and it's like sitting in the office in the studio, and I can't text them because it's a written rule until the final putt is made and it's graded a winner. Then we talk. I get the bang as I'm texting him. God bless Taylor Moore, 60-1. The man that gave it out, the man that's going to break down this week's tournament, the one and only Mr. Brady Kannon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dawson. A tough act to follow indeed, hitting a 60-1 shot like that, and a relative no-name in Taylor Moore. Just really his second full year on the PGA Tour. Spent about the last 4 years on the Korn Ferry Tour, but he's certainly made a name for himself, and another $1.45 million there winning the Valspar. You talk about Jordan Spieth, and boy, it was a great watch down the stretch. And of course, you know how it is. I mean, there's almost no better sweat in any form of sports betting than when you've got an outright guy coming down the stretch on Sunday. And Taylor Moore, a couple of huge putts down the stretch, a big bomb on 16, and then I think a really gutty effort on 18 from 5.5 feet, and he nails it to stay at 10 under par. He didn't miss a putt. He was 64 of 64 putting inside of 7 feet all week. Didn't miss a single one. So incredibly impressive performance by the young man. Does get his first win on the PGA Tour, and thankfully it was in our portfolio there. So a nice ticket cashed by us. And I'll tell you an interesting story that I read about Taylor Moore. Of course, the Arkansas Razorbacks, they advance in the same weekend in beating the number 1 seed Kansas. They move on to the Sweet 16. Taylor Moore went to Arkansas, and he nearly decided to play basketball instead of play golf for the Arkansas golf team. So an interesting little side bit there on Taylor Moore. But aside from all that, we'll take the winner at the Valspar. And, you know, you and I, again, we're talking backstage on this as well. My odds of going back to back are slim and none to begin with. But I think especially with the Dell match play, this is a really, really hard golf tournament to handicap.
Well, you know, and that's a perfect setup because, you know, the Masters is in a couple weeks. So you nail the Valspar. You're going to pepper the fairway here and give us some good advice and some odds here. But in a couple weeks, if we can wear the green jacket, we can wear that all year.
Exactly. Yep. Well, let's see. It was a couple of years ago when they played the Masters in November in the COVID year. I did hit Dustin Johnson, so maybe I'm due to hit one again.
And on Easter Sunday, I was looking at we're trying to get ahead of ourselves and we're working on some schedules and stuff. And I was talking to Riley before we started the closing bell before this show. And we're like, okay, Masters is when? And when is Easter? And it's like, yeah, no, Mom, I won't be over for Easter dinner. I'll be watching the back nine of the Masters.
Yep, I hear you. No, it ought to be a great Easter Sunday for sure. It always is. And like you say, the back nine on Sunday, that's the old saying, the tournament doesn't start until the back nine on Sunday. And so much of that holds true year in and year out. The way they designed that golf course to make it so much risk reward and excitement and drama down the stretch on that back nine on Sunday. It's just tremendous theater. It seems like I say, year in and year out.
So give us the 4-1-1 on leading up now to this week's tournament. As it is, it's a match play, and they play in groups to start tomorrow. They one advances, and they break them down into brackets, almost like March Madness. And if I remember correctly, 2 rounds on Saturday and then 1 on Sunday, or is it? How does that work?
I think you're right. I think it is. I think they do play twice on Saturday. I believe the final match used to be a 36-hole match. I don't think that exists any longer. I mean, it's so much golf. The winner of this event is eventually going to play 7 rounds of golf. And some of those might not go the full 18 holes. That's the way it works with match play. But a lot of golf for sure for whoever advances deep into this tournament. And you just about nailed it there, Jeff. Of course, it is a match play event, and that is different from our traditional stroke play events that we see on tour week in and week out. This is the only match play event of the entire tour calendar year. And for those that aren't familiar, typically you have 4 days where, you go out, you play all 18 holes, you either make the cut or you miss the cut, you're around for the weekend, what have you. In this format here, very similar to college basketball, you have the top 64 players in the world, basically. They assemble them here in a bracket, and they seed them in groups of 16 or groups of 4, 16 groups of 4. And then there's an overall number 1 seed. I think Scotty Scheffler is the overall number 1 seed, but very similar to basketball in that regard. And then you touched on it. These groups of 4, all 16 of them, they will play a round robin. So let's say Will Zalatoris and 3 other guys are in a group. They're in a pod, if you will, kind of like soccer as well. And it's pool play. They'll each have a match against one of the other members of that group. And that'll go over the first 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They'll get a match. They'll get 1 match with each of their other competitors in that group. And whoever amasses the most points in that group, you get a point for a win, a half point for a tie, and no points for a loss. Whoever gets the most points will emerge out of that group. And then come Saturday, we have what's, the Sweet 16. You're down to the 16 players after that. And then from there on, it's what they call the knockout round. So there are no more ties. If they are tied after 18 holes, they will play extra holes to decide a winner. Now, let me explain a little bit further the difference between stroke play and match play. The 2 guys start on the number 1 hole, right? If one guy makes a 4 on number 1 and the other guy makes a 3, the guy who made the 3 is 1 up. He's 1 ahead. And then maybe that guy who's ahead makes a bogey on the next hole and the other guy makes a par. Now they're even again. And it just goes. So it's hole by hole. Each hole can be won, tied, or lost. And then you might not even make it all the way to 18. A guy might be up by 5 strokes with only 4 or 5 holes, I should say, with only 4 holes left to play. And at that point, the match is concluded and you have your winner declared. So it's incredibly exciting to watch, Jeff. You know how it is during a typical stroke play tournament. You have the manufactured head-to-head matchups that the odds maker creates for all of us to bet into. Well, here we have actual matchups with player A versus player B in a known competition, looking each other straight in the eye and it's me against you. A typical stroke play event, player A doesn't necessarily know he's matched up, in Vegas against player B. But here they know exactly what the match is and they're competing directly. And then, of course, you have prices associated with, who's going to win that particular match. And What's also really difficult about it, Jeff, is in a stroke play event, you're playing against the field. You're one guy kind of out there on an island trying to perform your best. And from a handicapper's perspective, we're leaning on how they typically perform at that course, what kind of current form they're in, how they do on courses designed by that particular designer. All the things we look at in a traditional handicap doesn't necessarily play out here in the match play because it's so chopped up. You're no longer competing against the field. You're competing against one guy or a handful of guys over a course of a few days. And that skill set that a player possesses might not necessarily come to full fruition over the course of, 3 or 4 rounds of golf, where in a stroke play format, we're counting on that player's skill set to manifest itself over the course of 4 days. And last week it played out with Taylor Moore. You put Taylor Moore in this situation this week, playing head-to-head matchups and being a good putter, being a good scrambler, being good off the tee. That may all not gel over the course of 4 days, but rather it's being chopped up into individual matchups and stuff. So it really becomes difficult to count on how a player is going to perform in this match play format.
I have DraftKings up right now. I got outright, top 2 and top 4 finish. You talked about odds. You talked about pods, brackets, form, and actual strength or weaknesses in the bracket. But backstage, I talked about, it seems like Max Homer is the name everyone's talking about on social media. The reason is his bracket and his to get to advance. We know his form's in great. Now, when you do all your work, now do you also have to put in the form, and then from there take a look at the bracket and who's in that bracket as well?
For sure. Yeah, you definitely have to consider the bracket. And I know a lot of people are on Max Homa, and one of the reasons, like you say, obviously one of the top players in the world and in good form. He's already won this year and has been playing well. But some people are citing the fact that he has a relatively easy path in his bracket. I don't know. When was the last time that Hideki Matsuyama made for an easy path? I mean, I think that's a little bit of a roadblock right there. In fact, Hideki was a guy that I considered, taking maybe not in the, and that's another thing too. You can bet on who will win the individual group. And you don't have to bet. You can bet who's going to win the tournament outright. You can bet the individual head-to-head matchups day to day, but you can also bet on pre-tournament who's going to win their group. And basically every player is at plus money. I think your average favorite is about plus 125 in the group. Matsuyama probably in the neighborhood of plus 175, maybe 2-1 in that group. He's the second favorite behind Homa. But Matsuyama was a guy that I considered, if possibly for a group win or an outright win. I didn't end up landing on him, but I'd be awful careful. And I should preface this as well. I explained what a difficult handicap it is. Jeff, I have dumbed down the amount of risk tremendously this week versus what I do on a regular basis. I tread really lightly with this tournament because it is so hard to predict. But before you dive in here at all, whether it be large or small, and I recommend small, I would be a little bit careful about Max Homa because of Hideki Matsuyama lingering in that group.
And I guess the last piece, good form, not the strongest of match play player, or let's say average, not where we usually see this person in form, but a strong match play player. How do you weigh that balance?
That's a great question, and it is part of the handicap this week. I mean, we used to have Sergio Garcia back in the day, Colin Montgomery, Ian Poulter, Paul Casey, a lot of Ryder Cuppers that were tremendous match play players. And you could kind of lean on that a little bit in your handicap of this tournament. Now, Ian Poulter has had success here in the past. Sergio Garcia, here and there, not so much. It's different than a Ryder Cup, even for the Europeans, because you know how much of their heart and soul they put into the Ryder Cup. But you do definitely want a guy that is experienced in match play. I did land on actually one tournament debutant, a guy making his first time start here at the match play. But, all these guys have played match play. They've done it in college. They've done it throughout their career on the amateur level. But this is a little bit of a different stage. So I do recommend that as a part of your handicap. Go look at these guys' records in past WGC match play events. They've been playing here at Austin Country Club for the last 6 years. They did skip the COVID year. This is the 6th edition of the match play at Austin Country Club in Austin, Texas. But also look at their records in President's Cups or Ryder Cups. And I do believe that is part of what you have to take into account here. We don't have the typical shot link data. So you can't look at Austin Country Club and the match play and say, strokes gained approach is going to be important. And boy, this statistic really stood out here or there. You can't go there because it's not kept. And it's understandable because it's individual matches. And I understand that. And some guys, concede a hole. A guy hits it into the woods and a guy puts it on the green and is putting for birdie. And you say, go ahead, you have the hole. You can take a loss like that too. So it is pretty difficult to put together the shot link data. But, without that to go on, the handicap here again becomes a little bit more of a crapshoot. So you have to try and find every angle possible. And I think past history in match play is certainly one of those areas you can consider.
Well, the stage is yours. I'm going to turn it over to yourself and have at it.
All right. Well, like I say, we're doing a little bit of a guessing game here, and I'll call it an educated guess on what skill sets are going to be important. I did look at strokes gained approach. That is probably the utmost important stat week in and week out on the PGA Tour. I looked at strokes gained on the par fours. There are 11 par fours on this par 71. So obviously they make up the majority of the golf holes here. A lot of them are short too, in the neighborhood of 350 to 400 yards. I looked at strokes gained around the green, strokes gained scrambling, strokes gained putting on Bermuda grass. All of those short game areas, I think, are accentuated here in a match play format, because if you have a good putter, a guy that can get up and down, a guy that can hole some long putts, you can almost win a match on that skill set alone. You think about it, you're hitting greens in regulation and you're two putting for par and your partner knocks down a 35 footer for birdie, bang, that's a hole one. So a good putter is possibly more important here, I believe, in a match play format than a traditional stroke play event. And then finally, I mentioned birdies. Birdies or better gain. Birdies are a way to win holes as well. So I want guys that make a lot of birdies. Those were the 5 or 6 different skill sets I looked at. As far as correlated courses, I looked at Pete Dye courses. Austin Country Club is a Pete Dye track. In addition to that, I also looked at Wailea Country Club, where they play the Sony, Sea Island, where they play the RSM. And then also I looked at the Colonial Country Club, where they play the Charles Schwab, not too far away in Fort Worth, Texas. I felt those were similar layouts here to Austin Country Club. First guy I landed on was Patrick Cantlay, and I got a really good number on him at 20-1. I was seeing for the most part 16 or 17, and I was able to find a 20. This guy plays Pete Dye courses really well. He's been in good form this year. He's the top seed in his group. And if you look at his competitors, you talk about Max Homa having a quote unquote easy path. Patrick Cantlay is paired with Brian Harman, Nick Taylor, and KH Lee. And I don't think Harman or KH Lee are necessarily pushovers. Nick Taylor hasn't quite been all that hot as of late. And like we kind of allude to here, anything can happen over the course of 18 holes in a match. But I think Cantlay is clearly the favorite in that group. Also, his career match play record, President's Cups, Ryder Cups, what have you, is 8-5-2. So pretty strong. The one thing going against him here is he has never made it out of the group stage at this Dell Match Play Championship. He's always been stuck right before the Sweet 16, but I couldn't pass it up at 20-1 on Patrick Cantlay. He seems to check all the boxes for me. The next guy I went with, the next shortest shot, was Tony Finau at 22-1. In his group, you've got Christian Bezuidenhout, Adrian Meronk, and Kurt Kitayama. Adrian Meronk, a European Tour player, is a debutant here, as is Kurt Kitayama, who you recall, Jeff, just won for the first time ever on the PGA Tour a few weeks back at Bay Hill. And then Bezuidenhout has been in a real slump. His overall match play record 1-5-1. So I think Finau does have a good head start on this group. Over the last 36 rounds, he is 5th in this field for strokes gained total and 8th for strokes gained total on courses that measure less than 7,200 yards. Only about 7,100 yards is Austin Country Club, a pretty short track. He's also 4th for strokes gained approach and 2nd in birdies or better gained over the last 36 rounds against this field. Also, I mentioned Colonial being a correlated course for us this week. Finau has 2 top 5 finishes at Colonial. Tyrrell Hatton at 25-1 just came off a second place finish at the Players Championship a couple weeks ago. He's finished top 10 3 times here in this event at Austin Country Club. Very good match player, of course, Ryder Cup experience. Also, note the weather here. The first 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, the wind is supposed to blow pretty good into the neighborhood of 10 to 25 miles an hour. Tyrrell Hatton, a fantastic wind player who we saw battle it a few years ago at Bay Hill en route to his very first PGA Tour victory. The wind was absolutely howling that day. He is 9th in this field over the last 36 rounds for strokes gained approach. He is also 6th in strokes gained on the par 4s. So Tyrrell Hatton, the way he's been playing as of late and the way he's been playing at this tournament, the way he is in match play and in the wind, I think he makes a lot of sense here this week. Taylor Montgomery, I mentioned one guy I'm playing that's a debutant. I went with the local Las Vegas kid and UNLV Rebel, Taylor Montgomery, the 57th ranked player in the world and basically a rookie on tour. Did play a little bit last year in a select few events, but this is his rookie season. He's never played here before. But I mentioned he went to UNLV, and so he's obviously very familiar with the Mountain West Conference and playing golf in the Southwest. So I think he is going to be just fine in his ability to negotiate this Texas wind. Primarily, one of the reasons I bet on Taylor Montgomery here was his ability to putt. He is one of the very best putters in the world, let alone this field. He is number 1 on tour in putting average, number 1 on tour in 1 putt percentage and putts per round, and he is 2nd on tour in strokes gained putting overall. He's 2nd in this field the last 36 rounds for strokes gained putting on Bermuda grass. And I mentioned, a hot short game can oftentimes win you a match. I also bet on Taylor Montgomery to win his group at plus 325. He does have Shane Lowry in his group, and I believe Jordan Spieth is in his group as well. Jeff, this week I did not play on any guys that played last week at the Valspar. Okay. It's a very quick turnaround. Normally we go from Sunday to Thursday. In this case, we're looking at Sunday to Wednesday, and Jordan Spieth was mired in that brutal battle down the stretch with Taylor Moore and Adam Schenk at the Valspar, and evidently left disappointed, putting it into the water on the 16th hole. So you wonder if Spieth is going to be able to turn it around that quickly. Now, to make a case for Jordan Spieth, this is kind of like a home game for him. He went to the University of Texas in Austin, very close to this golf course. So I think he's probably familiar with the track, and I do believe he has the ability to turn it around. But I think Montgomery is a pretty good bet at 3-1 or better to win this group, and at 80-1 to win the entire thing outright. He is absolutely a blossoming player, and he is going to win on the PGA Tour pretty soon. Will it be a stage this big? I don't know, but again, I'm okay with taking a shot on Taylor Montgomery. And then finally, the last player I landed on for an outright, just 5 outrights this week. Again, dumbing down the dollar amounts, dumbing down the number of plays, taking everything a little bit more conservative this week. Maverick McNeely at 120-1. He was nursing injury not too long ago, but is coming off a 60th place finish at the Players Championship and a 36th place finish last week at the Valspar. He's the only guy I played that did play last week at the Valspar, but again, not really in contention. So, and coming off of that injury, it looks like he is healthy once again after 2 straight decent tournaments. And McNeely finished 17th on his debut performance at the match play last year. Like Taylor Montgomery, an absolutely nails putter, number 1 in this field for strokes gained putting on Bermuda grass. So those were really my reasons for landing on Montgomery. How, it seems that he's past the injury. We're getting a really big price on him. He's a fantastic putter. If you also look at what he's done, scrambling over the last 36 rounds, number one in this field, number one overall on Bermuda grass from putting from 5 to 10 feet. Those are key putts in a match play format, that 5 to 10 footer that you have to make either to have the hole or win the hole. McNeely, number one in the field in that regard. And as far as strokes gained on the par fours, he is 13th in this field and 26th in birdies or better gains. So it's not just the putter. He's doing it elsewhere as well. I thought 120 to 1 was a good price. And I also did bet him to win his group at 4 to 1.
So usually at this point, we talk about head-to-heads. We talk about first-round leaders as we're peeling back a normal weekend, normal tournament in the PGA that starts on Thursday. It goes through Sunday, 72 holes. Again, I was looking at DraftKings. They had outright, they had top 2, they had top 4. You talk about your outrights and that you always put into the top 20s as well. You're spot on. What you've done from last week with the 60 to 1 winner to obviously this week is you're dummying down the card, you're dummying down the risk, the bankroll risk, and the actual units that you're putting on this. At these 5 that you've given us, plus a couple to win the group, from here, where did you take this?
Yeah, you mentioned the top 20 finish. I didn't do any of that this week. Most books don't offer that market because, it kind of doesn't exist. You mentioned top 2, top 4. I didn't do any of that this week. Just played the 5 outrights, the 2 guys to win the group. And then I went head-to-head matchups for the first round. Obviously, there will be new matchups and new prices every day here. But for the first round matchups, teeing up on Wednesday, I went with Taylor Montgomery at even money over Shane Lowry. Lowry is no slouch himself and does have an excellent short game traditionally, but the putter and the scrambling that we normally see out of Shane Lowry has really escaped him this season so far on tour. So I like the advantage there for Montgomery as a short underdog. Now you're going to get some big prices here because you're going to have, Jordan Spieth against who knows, it's a 1 seed against a 16 seed, right? So who's our Fairleigh Dickinson in the mix here. We'll see if we can find one, but that's why you're going to get some crazy prices. Scotty Scheffler is the number 1 seed over, the number 4 seed in his group is probably minus 250, minus 300. I'm not going to go there, but I did land on Corey Connors at minus 135 over Sepp Straka. And I've seen him as high as minus 150. Connors finished 3rd in this competition last year and has had great success on Pete Dye courses. He's got as high as a 4th place finish at Harbour Town, a 7th at the Players. Tremendous ball striker. And Sepp Straka has just been a little bit off so far this season. So I like Connors. I would say minus 150 would be the maximum I would lay. If you can find better than that, more power to you. Will Zalatoris at minus 145 over Andrew Putnam. I've also seen minus 150 on Willie Z. I'm okay with that number. I mentioned Jordan Spieth, this kind of being a home game for him going to the University of Texas. Will Zalatoris lives in Dallas and is also very familiar with this golf course. So I think that is an advantage for those players that check that box. He'll be more familiar with it, I imagine, than Andrew Putnam, his competitor. And Putnam has really been struggling as of late. He's missed 4 out of his last 5 starts on the PGA Tour. Now, Putnam, he falls into that category where he's an excellent putter. But again, the way he's been playing as of late, not even the putter has been able to save him. So I'm going to bank on Willie Z being able to get it done here. He is 12th in this field for strokes gained approach and 10th in the field for birdies or better gained. And then finally, Tony Finau, another one of my outrights. I laid minus 165 with him over Christian Bezuidenhout. And I mentioned Bezuidenhout, just an awful record in match play and really hasn't been playing that great on the PGA Tour as of late as well. Tony Finau with a couple weeks of rest, I feel he'll be ready to go here. And I wouldn't mind laying a relatively big price there at minus 165.
Next week, where does the PGA go to?
We will stay in the Lone Star State, deep in the heart of Texas, the Valero Texas Open in San Antonio, Texas. And This is going to be an interesting one, Jeff, and we'll talk about it certainly next Wednesday. You're probably going to have some players in that field that are already qualified for the Masters and might be going there, some bigger names. Maybe I don't know about Jordan Spieth, but maybe a Justin Thomas. You probably have some bigger names in that field next week that, again, are already in the Masters field and might be going there for just a little bit of a tune-up. I would say to keep an eye on those guys as good bets to possibly miss the cut, because they're going to go there, take a couple practice swings, and get out of Dodge and head to Georgia. So, maybe something to think about. We'll see what the field gives us when we come around to next week at the Valero.
I can't wait. We can't thank you for changing up the schedule, coming to us Tuesday night versus Wednesday. Obviously, if we did our usual Wednesday at 3, we'd be recapping part of the first day. Brady, tell everyone where they can find you. Obviously, the scroll has been going the whole time for everyone to go follow you on Twitter at Las Vegas Golfer. But where else can they find you and your work?
Yeah, I appreciate the scroll there. You've got all the bases covered at Las Vegas Golfer on Twitter. And then I write articles each and every week for golf.com and also the PGA Tour. Their betting division is called Golf Bet. You just go to PGAtour.com. There's a tab up there at the top called Golf Bet, where you'll find myself and a number of my other colleagues writing about bets you can make week in and week out. And then, of course, weekly appearances on Sports Grid, which I will be on a little later this evening, as well as Wednesday night. And then I always come on Saturdays and Sundays as well.
The one and only Brady Kannon. If you weren't following him and you didn't follow him last week, shame on you. So now you have
I can't promise a back-to-back.
And the match play, as he said, probably one of the hardest tournaments to try to break down. Anything can happen. But then we get over to the Valero next week as we get another week closer to the Masters. Myself and Brady will be next Wednesday at our regular 3 p.m. time if there's no schedule conflicts. So please, again, go follow Brady at Las Vegas Golfer. You can follow myself at EC Sports Invest. If you came in late to the show, you can go over to YouTube at East Coast Sports Investors and watch the show from start to finish and get the 5 outrights and a couple other nuggets there. So everyone, behave yourself. Have some fun. We got some golf starting early tomorrow, and we will see you soon.